Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to take the often abstract, sometimes kind of mystical world of sound healing and translate it into a concrete, scientifically backed framework. We've got some fascinating source material today featuring doctors, researchers, and clinical practitioners, and we are going to explore exactly how frequencies, vibrations, and intentions actually interact with our biology. It's going to be a great one. So, here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll cover the scientific foundations, then clinical tools and techniques, third, internal awareness and self-healing, and finally, we'll wrap up with the integrated practice protocol. All right, starting off with section 1, scientific foundations. Because before we even look at a tuning fork or a singing bowl, we really need to understand exactly how sound interacts with the human body on a fundamental biological level. To really get sound healing, we kind of have to rethink what the human body actually is. As our source material details, your body isn't just a solid object. It's an ecosystem of roughly 50 trillion cells. 50 trillion! And inside every single one of those cells, there are 100,000 biochemical reactions happening every single second. It's mind-blowing. At a subatomic level, all of these molecules, these tissues, these cells, they're all vibrating. So when we introduce specific external sounds, it acts almost like a targeted ultrasound or, a deep sound massage that physically interacts with these buzzing, vibrating particles to effectively reset our internal physiology. And that cellular reset, it's heavily, heavily tied to our nervous system. The sources highlight something called polyvagal theory, which explains how sound directly interacts with the vagus nerve and the autonomic nervous system. For so many of us today, chronic stress literally traps us in a sympathetic fight-or-flight state. We're just stuck there. But sound healing interventions, like using low frequencies and focusing on prolonged exhalations, actively trigger the parasympathetic nervous system. This forces a massive biological shift into rest and recovery mode. And that is absolutely crucial because rest and recovery is the exact state where real cellular healing actually happens. Now, what's really interesting about this next concept is how the sources expand the actual definition of human anatomy to include what they call the biofield. This is described as a diffuse magnetic field surrounding your physical body. Clinical researchers are mapping this space and finding that it acts as a storage site for our memories and our emotional patterns. And these memories are held in the form of what they call standing waves. So when a practitioner scans this field, past traumas or physical pains literally present themselves as static or resistance in these waves. It's almost like hitting a patch of static on a radio dial. Taking this one step further, and this is where it gets really wild, the sources introduce the concept of ether. In this framework, the ether is a holographic medium that is present everywhere, all at once, and it contains all information. Because the physical body exists within the infinite mind, your biofield isn't just trapped in the local room you're sitting in. Through intention and mutual agreement, practitioners report that this non-local connection allows for some truly profound healing to occur across vast physical distances. It literally defies normal geography. Okay, moving to section 2, clinical tools and techniques. Now that we have our foundational physics and biology in place, let's shift gears a bit. We're going to look at the actual physical instruments and the precise clinical techniques that practitioners use to interact with this biofield and our nervous system. So first up, we have tuning forks. These are total precision tools in this practice. The sources outline two main types, weighted and unweighted. The weighted forks are placed directly on your physical body to relieve joint and muscle pain, but the unweighted forks are used to slowly scan the biofield around you. Think of a lower frequency fork, like the 174 Hz, as a comb with really fat tines. It's used to break up heavy static and deep resistance. Then, afterward, they might use a higher frequency fork, like the 528 Hz, which acts much more like fine grit sandpaper for that delicate crystalline integration work. And then, of course, we have Tibetan singing bowls. Interestingly enough, clinical studies highlighted in our sources suggest that the most effective way to play these isn't actually rubbing the rim, like you might have seen, but rather using a rhythmic tapping technique. That tapping is what properly activates the overtones. When practitioners place these bowls directly on the sternum or the heart or the solar plexus, those physical vibrations deeply stimulate the vagus nerve we talked about earlier. They also place smaller bowls right on the palms of the hands or the soles of the feet to balance the body's energy meridians. But hey, it's not just about single tones playing in a vacuum. It is all about the sonic mathematics. The specific intervals between notes create very specific biological reactions. For example, a perfect fifth, like playing a C and a G together, is highly harmonizing. It stabilizes the nervous system beautifully. On the flip side, a major second, like a C and a D, creates a dissonant friction. And that friction is used specifically to break up stuck, heavy emotional pressure. Practitioners even use three-note triads, like using the C major triad to help relieve migraines or the D minor triad to help clear out old behavioral habits and encourage positive change. And this brilliantly illustrates the whole point. This entire concept was flawlessly summarized by a practitioner's 6-year-old son, who captured the core goal of sound therapy perfectly with this quote: "Trauma basically scatters our energy out into the biofield." So the goal of these instruments isn't to somehow banish or get rid of bad energy. No, it's about collecting that scattered energy and returning it to the physical body so your physiology can actually function the way it was designed to. To achieve that return of energy, practitioners use a very specific 3-step clinical protocol. First is scanning. That's moving the fork slowly to detect the static in your standing waves. Second is combing. This is where the tool acts almost like a magnetic wand, pulling those scattered photons, that stray energetic light, right back toward the body's energy centers, or chakras. And finally, collimating. This step creates a laser-like coherence, fully integrating that energy so the person can feel entirely present, grounded, and focused. All right, on to section 3, internal awareness and self-healing. We've seen all the external tools, but true lasting recovery requires an internal shift too. Let's transition from the practitioner's gear to the individual's own internal consciousness and body awareness. The sources detail this highly effective 5-step internal healing process developed by Dr. David Hawkins. It starts simply but powerfully with activating unconditional self-love. Then, you surrender entirely to the physical sensations of whatever ailment you're dealing with, but without judging them. Next, you completely remove the medical labels from the challenge. Instead, and this is step 4, you actually welcome the sensations as friends, which totally neutralizes the fear response. Finally, you actively cancel any subconscious limiting beliefs that are keeping you sick. By learning exactly what your own internal feel-good reference point feels like, you can identify and correct imbalances way before they ever require medical intervention. Now, a massive part of this internal awareness is utilizing the cheapest, most effective sound healing tool you own, your own voice. Vocal toning of the ah sound is universally used in this practice to awaken self-healing in presence. And this is fascinating. Researchers observing crowd behavior at massive communal raves and dance festivals found that attendees will intuitively tone the O sound together as a group. This directly corresponds to the sacral chakra, naturally activating this immense communal subtle energy, all without anyone needing prior training. People just naturally do it. Let's move to section 4 and see how this all builds together, the integrated practice protocol. This is the grand finale, bringing the quantum theory, the clinical tools, and the internal awareness into one unified master session. So here it is, the ultimate integrated protocol for optimal outcomes. You begin with that 5-step internal surrender process, using the ah vocal tone to ground the client. Next, the practitioner scans the biofield with a 174 Hz tuning fork to locate that static and trauma resistance. When they find stuck energy, they strike those dissonant intervals, like the major second, to break it up, and immediately follow it with harmonizing intervals, like the perfect fifth, to stabilize the flow. Simultaneously, you stimulate the vagus nerve by tapping Tibetan bowls placed directly on the sternum, while encouraging deep abdominal breathing with long exhalations to trigger the parasympathetic nervous system. Finally, you comb and collimate all that scattered energy back into the body. And remarkably, as the sources claim, because of that non-local nature of the ether we discussed, this entire sequence can even be performed remotely, completely transcending physical distance. So, we've explored everything from the biofield to ancient instruments to the incredible power of your own voice. Remember, your body isn't just a machine. It is a 50 trillion cell symphony that is constantly responding to the frequencies around it. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to carry with you today. What is your vibration telling you right now? And how will you choose to tune it?